When people first hear the phrase Security Operations Center, SOC, they often picture a room full of glowing screens and experts stopping hackers in real time. But the more important reality is that an SOC is a way of organizing people and decisions so security events get handled consistently. Choosing how that center operates is one of the earliest leadership decisions that shapes everything else, including costs, speed, quality, and accountability. The operating model is not about buying a particular product or copying what a big company does, because beginners are often surprised to learn that two organizations can use the same tools but have very different outcomes. What matters is who does the work, when they do it, how they communicate, and how responsibility is shared when something serious happens. By the end of this discussion, you should be able to explain the trade-offs between an in-house team, an outsourced provider, a hybrid approach, and a follow-the-sun schedule without relying on buzzwords or assumptions. This is the kind of topic that sounds managerial, but it is actually foundational security thinking because it determines whether detection and response are treated like a core capability or a rented service. A useful starting point is to define what you want the SOC to do, because an operating model is only good or bad in relation to its mission. At a high level, SOC work includes monitoring signals, deciding what is real versus noise, gathering evidence, escalating when needed, coordinating response actions, and learning from incidents so the same mistakes are less likely to repeat. Beginners sometimes imagine that monitoring is the main job, but the real value comes from turning uncertain signals into confident decisions and then driving follow-through. That follow-through might involve notifying the right people, containing a threat, preserving evidence, or simply documenting why an alert was not a problem so the system can be tuned. In other words, an SOC is both a sensing function and a decision function, and the operating model influences whether those decisions happen fast, happen correctly, and happen in a way the organization trusts. If you only focus on who watches alerts, you miss the deeper question of who owns outcomes, because ownership is what keeps security from becoming a never-ending stream of tickets that nobody truly acts on. Keeping mission and outcomes in mind helps you evaluate models based on capability and reliability rather than on marketing promises. The in-house model is the simplest to understand conceptually because the organization builds and runs its own SOC with its own employees. The biggest advantage is control, which shows up as the ability to set priorities, align the work to business context, and evolve processes without negotiating with a third party. Business context matters more than beginners expect, because knowing what a system does and what is normal for it is often the difference between a correct escalation and a false alarm. An internal team can also build long-term relationships with the rest of the organization, which helps with trust, cooperation, and faster response when something goes wrong. At the same time, in-house SOC work is difficult to staff and sustain because it requires coverage, training, and career growth, not just hiring one person and calling it done. There is also a hidden cost in building management routines, documentation, and quality checks, because if those are missing, the team may appear busy while actually drifting into inconsistent decisions. In-house can be excellent, but it demands commitment to people, process, and continuous improvement rather than a one-time setup. Outsourcing shifts some or all SOC functions to an external provider, often described as a managed service. The appeal is that you can gain access to experienced analysts and 24/7 coverage without building everything yourself, which can be especially tempting when you are short on talent or time. Outsourcing also provides a kind of predictable operational rhythm, because many providers have established procedures for triage, escalation, reporting, and coverage planning. However, the key limitation is that a provider does not live inside your environment the way your own staff does, so they may lack deep context and may treat your organization like one of many. That can lead to shallow investigations, generic recommendations, or escalations that are technically correct but practically unhelpful because they do not match your systems and constraints. Another major risk is the illusion of transferred responsibility, where leaders believe outsourcing means they no longer need to own response. But the truth is that containment and recovery actions still require internal decision makers. Outsourcing can be a strong option, but only when expectations are explicit, data access is appropriate, and escalation paths are designed so the provider's work turns into real internal action. The hybrid model tries to combine the strengths of in-house and outsourced approaches by splitting duties in a deliberate way. A common pattern is to use an external team for basic monitoring and initial triage while keeping investigation ownership, response coordination, and business-critical decision-making inside the organization. Another pattern is the reverse, where internal staff handle day-to-day alerts but bring in an external provider for surge capacity, specialized expertise, or after-hours coverage. The reason hybrid is so common is that it acknowledges reality. It is hard to staff a full internal team with constant coverage, but it is also risky to depend entirely on outsiders for decisions that require business knowledge. Hybrid can reduce burnout and improve coverage while preserving internal ownership of outcomes, but it also increases coordination complexity because handoffs become a normal part of the workflow. Beginners should notice that hybrid is not a vague compromise. It is an intentional design choice that must define who owns what counts as done, and who is accountable when a high-impact event unfolds. If those responsibilities are unclear, hybrid can become the worst of both worlds, with duplicated effort, missed alerts, and finger-pointing during incidents. When done well, hybrid becomes a layered defense where the external partner improves reach and the internal team improves precision and follow-through. Follow the sun is best understood as a coverage strategy rather than a completely separate model, but it is often discussed as if it is its own category because it changes how teams work across time zones. The basic idea is that instead of forcing one team to cover nights and weekends, you distribute coverage so that analysts in different regions work normal daytime hours and pass work to the next region as the sun moves. The promise is better analyst wellness, more consistent alert handling, and true 24/7 response without exhausting one group. The challenge is that follow the sun makes handoffs the most critical part of the system, because work is continuously moving between people who may not share the same local context or even the same working style. For beginners, this is a good lesson in operational risk. Every time work changes hands, there is a chance for details to be lost, urgency to be misunderstood, or assumptions to be left unspoken. Follow the sun can be internal, outsourced, or hybrid, and the real question is whether the organization can maintain shared standards, shared evidence expectations, and consistent escalation discipline across shifts. If those foundations are weak, follow the sun creates speed on paper but confusion in practice. To choose between models in a disciplined way, you need a set of criteria that ties directly to what an SOC must deliver. Coverage is one criterion, but coverage alone is not the mission, because being awake 24 hours a day does not help if the team cannot make good decisions. Decision quality depends on training, familiarity with your environment, access to evidence, and the ability to collaborate with technical owners when deeper investigation is needed. Another criterion is responsiveness, which includes both time to notice and time to act, because noticing an alert is only the beginning of the story. Cost matters too, but cost must be considered as total cost of ownership, including management time, tool integration effort, onboarding work, and the cost of mistakes. A fourth criterion is resilience, meaning the ability to handle peaks, vacations, turnover, and complex incidents without collapsing. Finally, you should evaluate transparency, because if leadership cannot understand what the SOC is doing and why, they cannot govern risk effectively, and that problem can happen in any model when reporting becomes disconnected from reality. A common misconception is that outsourcing automatically produces higher expertise, but expertise is only valuable when it is applied with accurate context and clear objectives. External analysts may be very skilled at recognizing patterns, but if they do not know which systems are critical, which accounts are privileged, or which changes were planned, they may not be able to separate real threats from normal activity. Another misconception is that in-house automatically means better control, because control exists only when processes are mature and leadership invests in quality. A small internal team without clear routines can be more chaotic than a well-run external provider, even though the people are technically part of the organization. Beginners also sometimes think the best model is the one with the most monitoring, but detection that is not connected to response can create stress without improving security. The right question is not which model is strongest in theory, but which model allows your organization to repeatedly produce confident decisions and timely actions. Treating the model as a capability choice rather than a vendor choice helps you avoid shallow comparisons that focus only on features. Another important lens is ownership, because ownership determines whether incidents are handled as business events or as technical curiosities. In an in-house model, ownership is usually straightforward because the same organization hires the analysts and sets the expectations, but ownership can still be weak if leadership does not define authority and escalation clearly. In an outsourced model, ownership can become fuzzy if the provider is expected to respond but lacks permission to take action or lacks access to key systems, which turns their work into recommendations rather than results. Hybrid can be powerful because it can keep ownership internal while extending capacity, but only if internal owners are truly prepared to accept escalations and make decisions quickly. Follow the sun increases the need for explicit ownership because work passes from one group to another, and any ambiguity will show up during stressful situations. As you evaluate models, you should ask who is accountable for declaring an incident, who coordinates communication, who decides containment actions, and who confirms recovery. If those answers are vague, the model will produce delays and confusion no matter how many alerts are processed. Communication and handoffs are where good operating models become real and weak operating models collapse, because security work is fundamentally collaborative. An alert is rarely resolved by one person in isolation, especially when you need system owners to confirm what is normal, what changed, and what the impact might be. In-house teams can often walk down the hall or use internal channels that already exist, which reduces friction and speeds up clarification. Outsourced teams typically rely on formal escalation channels and tickets, which can slow down conversation unless the relationship is designed to allow fast interaction during urgent moments. Hybrid needs a shared language so that internal and external staff interpret severity and evidence in the same way, and that shared language does not appear automatically. Follow the sun adds the extra requirement that communication must be durable across time, meaning it must be documented well enough that another person can pick it up hours later without guesswork. Beginners should recognize that the SOC is not just a technical function, it is an organizational nervous system, and nervous systems need reliable signaling pathways to function under stress. Data access and evidence quality also shape which model is realistic, because analysts can only investigate what they can see. If the environment is complex, evidence may live in many places, and you need analysts who can pull pieces together into a coherent story without relying on fragile, manual steps. In-house teams may get broader access more easily, but broad access creates its own risks if not governed, so it requires discipline around permissions and oversight. External providers may be limited by contract terms, privacy constraints, or technical integration, which can result in a narrow view that makes confident decisions harder. Hybrid approaches can use internal staff to handle sensitive data while allowing external partners to work on less sensitive signals. But then you must design the boundary carefully so investigations do not stall when they hit the boundary. Follow the sun can increase the need for standardized evidence recording, because if evidence is not captured consistently, the next shift may repeat work or miss key details. This is one reason mature operations emphasize consistent case notes, clear timelines, and shared expectations about what it means to validate an alert. Talent and sustainability are often the deciding factors in the real world, especially for beginners who may underestimate how demanding constant security operations can be. In-house teams must be recruited, trained, and retained, and the organization must provide career development and healthy working conditions, or turnover will become a constant disruption. Outsourcing can reduce hiring pressure, but it does not eliminate the need for internal security leadership and internal partners who can act on escalations, because the provider cannot reboot your systems or change your business decisions for you. Hybrid can help sustainability by reserving specialized internal staff for the highest value work while offloading repetitive monitoring tasks, but it still requires internal expertise to evaluate provider quality and to tune the system over time. Follow the sun can improve wellness by avoiding night shifts, but it demands coordination maturity and enough scale to justify multiple regional teams. A strong choice is one that you can sustain year after year, because security is not a seasonal project, and the operating model must survive staffing changes, business growth, and evolving threats. It is also helpful to think about maturity, because different models fit different stages of organizational growth. Organizations early in their security journey may benefit from outsourcing or hybrid approaches because they provide structure and coverage while internal capability is still developing. More mature organizations often move towards stronger internal ownership, either through a fully in-house model or a hybrid model where external support is carefully scoped and measured. Follow the sun tends to appear when there is enough scale, enough global presence, and enough process maturity to standardize work across locations. Beginners should notice that maturity is not about being big. It is about being consistent, because a small organization with disciplined processes can outperform a large one with fragmented decision-making. When you match the model to maturity, you reduce the risk of pretending to have capabilities you do not actually have, such as claiming 24/7 response when escalations sit unanswered. The model should fit the organization you are today while also allowing a path to grow, because your future needs will change as systems and threats evolve. To make the choice practical, imagine a simple scenario where an alert suggests a suspicious login to a sensitive system, and the team must quickly decide whether it is a real compromise or a false alarm. An in-house team might know that the user is traveling, that a maintenance window is in progress, or that a certain pattern of logins is normal for that role, which can lead to a faster, more accurate decision. An outsourced team might detect the same signal but lack those details, so they may escalate more often to be safe, which can overwhelm internal staff if escalations are frequent and low quality. A hybrid approach could allow the provider to gather initial evidence and raise a well-documented case, while an internal owner adds context and decides action, which can preserve speed and improve accuracy. In a follow-the-sun schedule, the key test would be whether the next region can read the case history, understand what has been tried, and continue investigation without restarting from scratch. This kind of thought experiment keeps the discussion grounded in outcomes rather than labels. By the time you are choosing among in-house, outsourced, hybrid, and follow the sun, you are really choosing how your organization will make security decisions under pressure and how it will turn signals into action. In-house offers the strongest alignment and context, but it requires investment in staffing, training, and process discipline to avoid becoming inconsistent and overwhelmed. Outsourcing offers speed to launch and easier coverage, but it must be governed carefully so the work is not generic and so escalations connect to real internal response. Hybrid can deliver an effective balance by combining external capacity with internal ownership, yet it succeeds only when handoffs, responsibilities, and evidence standards are designed explicitly. Follow the sun can enable true continuous operations with healthier schedules, but it raises the bar for shared standards and communication because work passes between teams across time and distance. If you remember one core idea, it is that an operating model is a reliability choice. The best model is the one your organization can sustain while consistently producing high-quality decisions and timely action when security events occur.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.